Bombshell new allegations in the investigation of JonBenét Ramsey's brutal murder. Our Boulder authorities sitting on evidence from this basement that should be analyzed using modern DNA testing. That's what is allegedly revealed in the thousands of pages of police files investigative reporter Paula Woodward says she obtained. In an Oz Show exclusive, she is here today with never-before-seen evidence that could finally bring about justice for JonBenét.
Police, what's going on? What's going on there, ma'am?
We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please.
Explain to me what's going on, okay?
There's a note left and our daughter's gone.
JonBenét Ramsey, the 6-year-old beauty pageant queen, forever etched in our minds as the haunting face of America's most baffling murder mystery. It's been a quarter of a century since a rambling 3-page ransom note was found in the Ramseys' Colorado home the morning after Christmas of 1996. And then later, JonBenét's tiny, lifeless body discovered by her father in their basement. At first, authorities focused on her parents, Patsy and John, compounding the family's grief and heartache. The Ramseys maintained their innocence, but it wasn't until 2008 that they were finally exonerated. 2 years after Patsy lost her battle to ovarian cancer at the age of 49. The tragic case has been investigated extensively over the past 2.5 decades. And JonBenét's father and half-brother, John Andrew, continue to search for answers. But the 6-year-old's gruesome murder remains unsolved to this day. Do you believe the killer of your daughter, JonBenét, is still out there?
I do. I mean, he could be dead. I don't know. But, yeah, he's not been caught. And, you know, the real fear is that he's done this again. I don't know. But this is an evil, evil person.
Now, with the 25th anniversary of her death fast approaching, is law enforcement standing in the way of justice for JonBenét? A quarter century later, and so many questions still remain about what happened in this house. So before we get to the latest, I want to remind you of all the crime scene layout. John and Patsy's bedroom was this entire 3rd floor, this whole area. JonBenét's room was here. Her brother Burke's room was here, on the opposite side of the 2nd floor. Now, just before 6 a.m., Patsy called 911 saying she found a ransom note on the stairwell down the hall from this door, the exits to the outside. Now, first police arrived at the house just minutes later, but it wasn't until 1 p.m. that John Ramsey finds his daughter in the corner of the basement down here and carries her lifeless body upstairs. Police were left with a disturbed and unsecured crime scene. Investigative reporter Paula Woodward has been covering this case since the beginning. She's the author of the explosive new book, Unsolved, the JonBenét Ramsey Murder 25 years later. She joins us now exclusively. You've been in this house that we laid out here as well. Police got there, but they didn't secure the scene. They didn't discover the body. If they had found JonBenét immediately, how would it have changed everything?
I think there's a very good chance that the case would have been solved. It was a pristine crime scene if they had found her body. The body would have been there, the blankets would have been there, the tape would have been there. People would have not been wandering in and out before they contained that scene. It was a mess because her body was not found.
So walk us through what happened. The first officer went to the basement, he claims, and he opened up a bunch of doors and even went up to this door right here, but did not open it up because apparently, had trouble. But JonBenét's body was just past that door. Walk us through what happened.
The police officer said in his report that he didn't open the door for 2 reasons. He said he tried to open the door, but he says it was secured at the top. Then he also said the door opened inward and he was looking for a way to access out of the house, which really doesn't make sense. And so he didn't open the door. Imagine what would have happened if he had opened this door. Imagine what would have happened with this case. It's incredible.
Are you concerned that he actually didn't approach that door?
I think that you have to raise that possibility. That was raised by police officers to him in subsequent debriefings. They said to him, hey, did you actually search the basement? He said yes, but the question was raised. And you have to ask it given his excuses for not opening the door.
The details are graphic,
Yes,
but it's a medical show, and I think it's important because it does shed some light on perhaps what happened to JonBenét. Can you remind everyone what had been done to her? Her body was lying just past that door you pointed to.
The autopsy brings out what happened to her, and it was a very vicious attack. She was sexually abused. She was strangled with a garrote, and a garrote, as you know, has slip knots that you can tighten. Furrows were left in her neck. The rope was left embedded in her neck. She was hit in the head so hard that an 8-inch crack from the top of her eyebrow all the way across her skull happened on her skull, and there was a caved-in portion. It was a terrible, vicious attack. No one can figure out why. Who would do it? Why would they do something like this?
It's very hard to imagine someone who loved somebody else could have done that to them, even if there was something else going on.
It is.
So early on in the investigation, let's go talk as you sit down. Media coverage focused on the possibility that JonBenét's parents were responsible for this crime. That's why I wanted you to go through this graphic nature of the crime scene. A ransom note became a point of focus. It was 2.5 pages long, which clearly took some time to compose, and was written using a pen and notepad from the Ramsey home. Did Patsy write this note, do you believe? And if not, how does that rumor persist all these years later?
Because police officers keep leaking that she wrote the note. They leaked to newspapers and television reporters that Patsy wrote the note, that a woman wrote the note, that there were characteristics of Patsy's having written the note. But the defense attorneys, the Ramsey attorneys, and the prosecuting attorneys for the police had experts come in to analyze her handwriting. And they all said within 1 percentage point, no, she didn't write the note. But they did not ever tell the media that.
No, which I'm sure caused lots of pain for the Ramseys, besides losing their daughter. There were also rumors of incest, which, again, sort of stunning when you hear it, especially in this light of what you just described at the murder scene. You say that was actually ruled out days later, that incest was really not part of this.
It was. There were 3 experts who testified, hey, there was no prior sexual abuse. The coroner, a doctor from Children's Hospital who was brought in as part of the autopsy, and her pediatrician. They all said there was no prior sexual abuse. They told the police that. In spite of that, 2 months later, the police leaked that they were investigating John Ramsey for incest. It was dishonest, it was unethical, it was cruel. They knew that there was no prior sexual abuse, yet they were telling people, hey, we think that he sexually abused his daughter.
We got more to talk about. Coming up, is the Boulder Police Department sitting on evidence they know should be tested for DNA? Paula reveals her shocking discovery. Investigative reporter and author of Unsolved, the JonBenét Ramsey murder 25 years later, Paula Woodward is with us today, exclusively revealing shocking new claims in this horrifying case. So we now know that the unknown male DNA that was identified was found in 3 spots on JonBenét's body: under her nails, on her underwear, and in 2008, using new touch DNA analysis, another sample was found on the long john leggings that she wore that night. Now, based on those findings, the Boulder District Attorney exonerated the Ramsey family. But despite all this information out there, there's still members of the police department in Boulder who think that Patsy is guilty. And I'm just trying to understand, what are the arguments for that?
I don't know why police officers believe that, because there's very little evidence. They were in the house when she was murdered. So, of course, they have to be looked at. Beyond that, what evidence is there? There just isn't a lot of evidence at all.
Well, there's her notepad that was her letterhead.
Right?
There are many ways of explaining that, but...
There's the notepad, which could have been taken out of the house and brought back in. It appears it's a premeditated note. There's the pen. The ink from that pen was used to write the note. There are things like that that convince them, but you need to take a hard look at the abuse that was done to this child and ask yourself, would these parents have done that when there are no indications from past behavior that they'd ever done anything to harm either child?
You've been involved in this case very intimately for many years. You actually had a chance to speak to Patsy before she passed.
I did.
In your personal opinion, was she capable of a sadistic crime like this?
Patsy Ramsey was, from the time that I knew her, Patsy Ramsey was kind, she had a good sense of humor, she was very smart, and she had a very deep faith. In the months before she died, she would talk with me with the understanding that I never revealed this information until after she died. And among the things that she said was she wondered about who would be so evil as to kill her daughter. Was it someone they knew? And she also said she looked forward to seeing JonBenét. She believed in life after death. She simply could not understand what had happened to her daughter and why it had happened. And I think it's probably very unlikely that she would have had the viciousness and the violence in her to do what was done to JonBenét, because this took a bit of time to do.
Because you've been involved with the case for so many years, you actually have gotten close to the Ramsey family, and you've been accused of being too close to them.
Right.
So I want to give you a moment to defend yourself.
I think that my being accused of being too close to the Ramseys was just simply part of the ongoing attacks for anybody who allowed the Ramseys to have their say. It's just basic journalism 101. You have to get as many sides of the story as you can. You definitely have to get the Ramsey side of the story. I was one of the few who was able to do that.
So let's get to the evidence again.
Okay.
2016, authorities say that they actually have the ability to run a more detailed new DNA test.
Right.
Was that ever done?
Not that I know of. As of this week, no, it has not been. Boulder police have control of the DNA. They have the ability to run the new DNA tests that have caught the Golden State Killer
And many others.
and many others. They have said they're not going to do it. Their reasoning is we're waiting for more DNA advances that might help us in using less of the DNA to do that test. Well, how long is long enough in this case? And given their 25 years of apparent bias in the case, thinking the Ramseys did it, does there need to be a new agency who looks at it and decides, gee, is it time to run this DNA testing right now?
Help our viewers and me. I mean, my natural instinct is to hope and pray that the police department is doing everything possible to find the truth. What would be the argument for why authorities would be purposely sitting on evidence that could identify the real killer?
I've never been able to figure out why they've acted as they have for 25 years. They've been convinced that the Ramseys killed JonBenét, and they've set out to prove it in the media. I just don't know. I can't understand it.
Is it possible they think that because Patsy killed her, that by doing the DNA analysis would reveal that, and they don't want to hurt the family further? I'm searching for answers like you.
No, I don't think so. I think that they wanted to avenge her death because they didn't find her body, and that all bets were off. They could do anything they wanted, including destroying this family.
JonBenét's half-brother, John Andrew, told me that he wants the suitcase handle tested using the same touch DNA technology that found a sample on her long johns. The theory is that the murderer could have exited the basement using the suitcase because it was pulled up next to the window, easy enough for someone to step on, and there's no reason for the suitcase to be next to that escape window. You can see the full explanation of the intruder theory now on DrOz.com if you desire. But I want to understand, could other untested pieces of evidence at home yield more DNA, like that suitcase handle probably would?
Yes, with the advances in DNA technology, that's why it's so important to get a new agency on this, so that they can take a hard look at the DNA, at the objects that have been tested and haven't been tested, and decide whether or not new DNA technology would be effective in re-examining those.
Who killed JonBenét?
I don't know. I wish I did know. What is the motive? That's what's always puzzled me. Why would someone want to kill this little girl? She's this sweet, innocent child who has the gifts of beauty, self-assuredness, intelligence, and from every explanation in talking with her teachers, one of her teachers said, I can't leave the classroom to take a child to the school nurse. If I can't do that, I'll have JonBenét do it because she's kind, she's very natural with other children, and she helps protect them. What a nice thing to say about a child, a little kindergarten girl. And you just can't let this case rest, yet that's what is happening. It's languishing. It needs new eyes on it. What about the DNA? If a new agency says, okay, we're going to wait on the DNA, I would trust that, but I don't trust it coming from Boulder Police.
Do you believe if the case remains under the jurisdiction of the Boulder Police, we will ever have an answer?
Probably not. I don't think that there's the interest. I don't believe there's the aptitude to resolve the case. They've had 25 years. The two people who are in charge of it are people who were on the case 25 years ago. Wouldn't you, just for appearance sake, switch to some other people with new eyes to look at that case, even though it's from your department?
And what about the FBI? They get involved all the time in unsolved cases that seem more challenging.
I would think that the FBI would have to be invited in. The governor of the state of Colorado can get an outside agency involved in it, an outside Colorado agency involved in it. But so far, no one's really asked for the help. It's just staying in Boulder, and I think that there's a perception of, we hope that this goes away. There certainly is not aggressive looking for a killer on that case.
We reached out to the Boulder Police Department for a response to Paula's reporting, and they told us, because this is an ongoing, open and ongoing investigation, we are unable to talk about this case. As always, we encourage anyone with information about this crime to report it to investigators. We've got the full statement and Boulder Police's tip link at droz.com. Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your reporting.
Thanks.
Unsolved, the JonBenét Ramsey murder 25 years later. There it is. It's available now. Coming up, JonBenét's father and half-brother are speaking out in the wake of these shocking claims. What will it take to finally get this little girl justice? We're back with the latest on the bombshell allegation that Boulder police may be sitting on evidence that could help solve JonBenét Ramsey's murder. In response to the shocking news, her half-brother John Andrew has said they think Patsy Ramsey did it, and in their minds, they solved it. So why put any effort into it? It's insane. He's accused Boulder PD of trying to run the clock out. Here to help us make sense of this is our show legal contributor Joey Jackson. Could the Ramsey family, or anyone else for that matter, actually sue the Boulder Police Department to compel them to reveal evidence and actually force the DNA testing?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not going to happen for a number of reasons, right? I mean, you would think if that were the case, it would have happened already. It's been 25 years. But here's how it works. When you're looking at freedom of information and transparency, generally you have that. Public records should be released. But when it comes to investigations, you could shield that information from public view. And so therefore, they don't have to release it. On the issue of forcing testing, police departments, law enforcement has vast discretion with respect to what they investigate, what they don't, the manner, the mean, the mode, and the resources that they dedicate to it. And so it's very unlikely that anything like this will occur.
That stated, the recent cold case was solved in Las Vegas using 15 cells with a DNA test, thanks to private funding from an anonymous donor. John Andrew and other volunteer investigators dedicated to the case have told me that Boulder PD has turned down their offers to donate money to pay for the testing. I thought that was the major obstacle. So now that I know that it's not, I start to raise other issues. And then the big question I guess everyone should be asking is there a public service to this case being solved all these years later?
I mean, I really think so, right? The public curiosity is there. The case is riveting, and you would think that there would be a public imperative to get it done. And on that ground, you would think, as a result, you can meet with political leaders, and that may be the best way to go. If there's a political will to do it, governor getting involved, local district attorney getting involved, maybe there'll be something there. But absent that, I just don't see it.
I get it, but we have opportunities in this country to bring in the bigger guys, right?
That's right.
So the FBI, for example, could be brought in, or other jurisdictions could start to play a role. How do you trigger that?
See, it's a great question. And the reality is, though, that the federal government, FBI, vast resources, right? We have a in this technological world and age, so many things you can bring to bear. But the federal government does not like going and telling local law enforcement what to do, right? We have jurisdictional issues. If it's a federal case, because it's across state lines, it happened on federal property, federal government, surely they'll get involved. But when it comes to a local matter for which it has local control, I don't think they're going to go and start dictating to them. And the other thing is, too, Oz, is that, it's been around the case a long time. Does the federal government really want to get its imprint on something that's been rather messy? Perhaps we should just leave it to the locals, and I think that's what we're seeing.
I bet that's probably a big part of this. Also, the FBI would just get overwhelmed and be bogged down, and they look bad as well. And we spoke to JonBenét's father, John, after this news broke, and he told us the Boulder police situation highlights a fundamental problem in our nation's police structure. Smaller jurisdictions, like Boulder, lack the experience to deal with unimaginable crimes. You can see his full statement on droz.com. If someone other than the Ramseys is proven to be JonBenét's killer, could that open up the police department to litigation?
So I don't think so, right? I know you're going down a lot of doors, and I'm shutting the doors as you're going, but here's the reality. In the event the police are aggressive in their law enforcement and they arrest someone, that person has a remedy, or those people they arrest have a remedy for false imprisonment, right? Malicious prosecution, false arrest, civil rights violations, but the reverse isn't true. So in other words, what I'm saying to you is when the police overreach and they grab someone and that person really shouldn't be embroiled into the system. That person has a remedy. When the police don't grab someone that they potentially should grab and they should look at, right, there's no remedy in reverse. The police have a right to, given their discretion, choose who they think should be prosecuted.
Final door I'm going to open for you, right? Who can investigate the investigators? Because that's the issue that's coming up, especially when allegations like these arise.
Yeah, and that's the greatest point of all. I think we have to do better as a society with respect to oversight, right? With regard to looking and evaluating cases and not just sitting on them. I think if we have technology and we have other things that could bring a new focus to a case, to bring eyes anew on a case, we should do that. And I think that they're not sufficient protocols. What we do now is police investigate, and then if they find that there's something there, they'll prosecute. If there's not, they'll let it go. But at the end of the day, that's what we have, and that's sort of our system of justice. It certainly needs a lot of improvement, to be clear.
I love having you here, Joey. Practical insights.
Nice to be here. Thank you, Oz.
Every murder victim deserves to have their case solved, but especially in an innocent case of a 6-year-old girl. Law enforcement agencies throughout this country have limited resources. I get it. They got a huge responsibility to keep all of us safe, which we should never take for granted. But this is important. Thanks to advances in science, cases that have been cold for decades are being closed all over the country. We've been talking to them on the show. So if there's a chance JonBenét's murder can be found, if the murder can be solved, I want to encourage the Boulder Police Department to submit the evidence they have from modern testing. And if anything that Paula has reported is inaccurate, I welcome them to come on the show anytime to set the record straight.